But they will continue to gather facts so we can figure out exactly what caused this deadly UPS plane crash. For now, we're going to send it over to Metro Hall.
So yesterday and the night before, certainly there's been a long 36 hours for our city. 36 hours of tragedy, 36 hours of heroism and hard work by our first responders, 36 hours of our city once again coming together and showing our strength in these challenging times. The updates are that as of right now, 12 individuals have been located who have died in the crash. Their bodies have been removed from the scene by the coroner, and they are currently working on identifying each of those 12 victims. The number of missing that we have tracked through our Family Assistance Center that LMPD has been operating since right after the crash is down to 9. I had previously reported that there were 15 individuals that had been reported as missing. We have located 6 of those individuals over the last 24 hours. And so we're now down to 9 that are missing. If you do the math, we may have located all of the victims. There may be more that have not yet been reported. And so I would ask if there are families that are still out there that are wondering about someone who may be missing, please call immediately. Please call 800-631-0604. That would be incredibly helpful information if there are still individuals who you have not heard from and you think may have been around the crash site. Our hope is that we have located all of the victims at this point, but again, we do not know. The search will continue. The teams will be out there searching through the debris now in what's called a delayering search in coordination with the NTSB and their investigation about the crash. There will also be individuals that will be looking underneath. There's so much debris there. There's so much charred, mangled metal that not all of the bodies may have been located until you look underneath certain things. And so that is going through the various layers of debris on the field. That will begin now. Everything to date has been just looking at what can be seen without moving debris. NTSB, as they reported yesterday, has identified and located the black box on the voice recorder, and that should be incredibly helpful, assisting with their investigation. And also Jody Myman, our Director of Emergency Management Services, he and members of his team are in close coordination and communication with the NTSB, staying up to date on their search and anything that we can do to assist them with their investigation and communications. We've talked a lot about first responders over the past few days and the amazing work that they did. I want to give a special shout out to one agency, and that is our Muhammad Ali Louisville International Airport Department of Public Safety. At the airport, you may or may not know, but there is a Department of Public Safety just for the airport, fire, EMS, and police all in one department led by Chief Josh Grimes. They responded immediately just because of their proximity on the airport. They were the very first responders on the scene that drove through the fences, past the airport boundaries to immediately begin the first response to the crash and the immediate aftermath. They've had to deal with a lot since then, and I want to give a special thanks to all of the public safety professionals that work for our airport. Thank you all so much. Speaking of the airport, there are 2 runways that are now open at the airport. That is 1 more than yesterday. There's still one runway that the NTSB is still connected to their investigation. To answer a few other questions that we've been getting from members of the community, which are not yet full answers, but this is the best that we have at the time. I know there's still folks that don't have power for some of the businesses that are located near the crash site. LG&E is on site right now, and they are seeing what they can do to get power turned back on. The NTSB will be releasing buildings as they identify properties that they either have recovered the debris from or are not directly pertinent to the investigation. And it's safe that LG&E will be restoring power throughout this process. Yesterday, when I was out at the crash site, there were wires everywhere that had come down as a result of the crash. Wires on the street, wires on property. And so we need to, again, put public safety and people's safety at the top of the list. And so they will be getting the power back on as safely as they can. Also, there are still some roads that are closed, Grade Lane and Crittenden Drive. Again, we will be working to reopen those as quickly as we can with safety as the top priority. So we're looking at a plan for doing that. And for the businesses that are located along Grade Lane, we are making contact with those businesses, and there will be escorted access opportunities for business owners to survey their property if there's anything that they need until such time as their full access is restored, as the roads are open. And my final report before we'll take questions, and then we'll go into the second part of our briefing. But the final thing is just extending an invitation. There's a vigil tonight at the Teamsters local headquarters here in Louisville, and they have invited the entire community to come out to that vigil to be together during these times. And that's something that I think is very helpful for the entire community, is to come together, to share our sorrow, share our heartbreak, to say some prayers for the victims and the families that we lost in this tragedy, and to find strength to keep moving forward individually, as families, and as a community. That's the update we have as of right now, and I'm happy to take any questions about the crash before we continue. The question was, what have I learned about the maintenance records for this plane? I do not have any information on the specifics about the plane. I will defer to NTSB and UPS on questions related to the investigation. I don't have anything to update on. So the question is, were there people in jump seats? Again, I will defer to UPS on exactly where that is. The information that I have is that there were 3 individuals that were all part of the crew on the plane. That is the extent of my information. I don't know where on the plane they were sitting or what they were doing at the time of the crash. I'll defer to, the question was about the latest on the air quality after the crash, and I'm going to turn it over to Director Jody Meiman for that.
Yes, we were able very quickly deploy air monitors right after the crash, and then the 41st Civil Support Team from the National Guard came in and took over air monitoring for us, and they actually not only air monitored around the area, but we gave them several intersections for, going north where the plume was, all the way towards the river, and they were not getting any significant air monitoring readings for any health hazards all the way to the river, and that's why through the night we were able to significantly reduce that shelter-in-place area now to what it is. It's just a quarter of a mile, which really only encompasses the site. We're still continuing air monitoring around the area. It's been a subcontractor coming in, so we've released the 41st Civil Support Team, and now we've got a contractor on site that's doing real-time air monitoring 24/7. They always check for any kind of explosive limits, any kind of volatile organic compounds. They check for carbon monoxide. They check for oxygen levels to make sure that the oxygen levels are correct. And like I said, away from that site, they didn't get any adverse readings. Really nothing right now. We're getting very minimal because the spot fires have gone down. We're not getting any smoke off the site, so we're not getting any adverse health readings at the site itself. Just the workers.
There are also, just to clarify, within that radius that Jody just mentioned, there are very few, if any, individuals that they're beyond the people who are working at the site. The question was what federal assets are involved beyond the NTSB. The FBI is also involved in this investigation. As we mentioned yesterday, if individuals have debris on their property that they report, it's actually going to be an FBI agent that comes and meets them at that property to do the investigation about that debris that's located on their property. We've been in touch, all of the congressional delegations, Congressman McGarvey, Senator Paul, Senator McConnell, Senator Paul, Congressman Guthrie, they've all been in contact with us. In terms of other federal agencies. Oh, EPA. Yeah. And the EPA and ATF as well. They can report that. Whether that's useful to the investigation or not, I defer that to the NTSB as to what is important for their investigation. I think they're mostly focused on actually parts of the plane, but knowing, my guess is they will want to know where other things happened. I've heard those same reports about things that might have been some mail that might have been on the plane and how far it traveled. It's mind-blowing to hear some of those stories. Yes.
Yeah, so we've got urban search and rescue teams from all over the county that have come in and they're doing methodical searches. And then again, if they find something that they need to get into, they've got to coordinate with the NTSB to make sure that it's not any kind of aircraft component or anything. And if it is, they have to be approved to be able to move that around. So we've got local urban search and rescue teams from around the county that are working through that. Until we can completely confirm that we've got all the victims located.
Yeah, many of those members on that urban search and rescue team are members of the various fire departments, including Louisville Fire Department. Chief Brian O'Neill is with us here today as well. The question was about hotspots that we were talking about yesterday and the status of the firefighting.
Yes, they're out as of now, but they still could, they could still flare back up just because of the deep seedness of it. So we've got fire crews that are staying 24/7 throughout the night, monitoring anywhere that we suspect that anything could flare up. But as of right now, they're out. Throughout the half mile, they're just throughout the half mile. Like I said, various locations. I mean, they're just sporadic. Because they're so deep seated and because it could be a component of the aircraft itself, we don't want to get in there and move things around in order to not mess up the investigation.
I believe the question was about the 9 who I said are still unaccounted for. Those are all individuals that were presumed to be in that area at the time of the crash. Cadaver dogs are not being used right now. The difficulties of finding the individuals. Well, again, so the 9 people that have been reported missing are family members that have not gotten in contact with these individuals that they have reason to believe might have been in or around that area. We have located 12 victims of this crash, including what we believe to be 3 of the UPS crew. Yesterday, we were able to identify 6 people who were on that list the day before by doing continuous outreach to the individuals in many different ways, or other people that connected with our teams to let them know that they're okay. So we'll continue. We don't have any other information at that point. So now the family assistant, the question was about the movement of the Family Assistance Center. We wanted to have a central, well-known location where, and we were trying to identify who may be missing, that people could easily get to, and that would be heavily publicized to get that information in the hours after the crash. And now that we believe we have identified the individuals who are still being missing, we're looking for privacy for the family to continue to support the families that are searching for answers, that are grieving, and we want to be there to be able to continue to support them in a private setting. And so that's why we're asking people, if there are still individuals who are missing, please call 1-800-631-0604. Yes, sir. I was.
Yes.
So I'll answer the second question first about the access to the site. The NTSB is controlling the site right now, and so I would direct that question to the NTSB about access to the site for members of the media. In terms of what I saw yesterday, it was tragic, it was horrific. It was, you hear people say, oh, you only see that in the movies. This was worse than the movies. Half a mile long, standing there where you could just see the destruction, the charred, mangled metal. In some cases, at that point, there were still some smoke rising from piles of debris. Saw first responders that were still working intensely, most of whom had just gotten to the scene, some of whom, though, had been there since the night before, that were still working, doing whatever it takes to identify victims, to make sure we could get back safely as a community. Their heroism is unmatched. You see that in times of tragedies like this, but I know from the work that I'm doing right now that it's happening every day in ways large and small across our entire city, across our entire country. But the amount of things that were just so charred. We saw a top of we call it a silo, where there was literally part of the tail of the plane appeared to be sticking out of a storage silo. And then I don't know how many yards away, you saw the top of that silo sitting on the ground, just totally charred. Just the intensity of the flames and what that did so quickly to a half a mile long debris field was unimaginable prior to seeing it with my own eyes firsthand. Well, thank you all very much. We will continue to keep the community up to date as soon as we have information. I know there's a lot of questions about who the victims are. The coroner will be releasing information on the identity of the victims as they have that information. UPS may be releasing information about the crew members. We will continue to keep you all updated, and our teams will continue to stay at work as long as necessary to get answers for the families, to get answers for the community, and to support the NTSB in their work. I will close with, when I met NTSB board member Inman, yesterday, he told us about what the NTSB and basically their job is to learn what happened, use that knowledge to prevent future tragedies like this from happening in the future. And so we want to support the NTSB in every way, shape, or form that we can to get all of the answers as to what happened, to work to prevent a tragedy like this from happening in any other community ever again as we move forward. It's also during times like this that coming together is so important, and being together as a community can help in the healing process, help in the grieving process, and to help as we all move forward into the future. And so I'm incredibly proud that this weekend, we're going to be celebrating Veterans Day as a community, which will give us an opportunity to come together as a community. If I can invite some of our friends that are here today that are involved in the Veterans Day Parade to now join me as we talk about one way the community will have an opportunity to come together, to show our strength as a community and to show our support for veterans who have been out there working on behalf of everyone throughout the entire country for generations. We'll take a quick moment as they come up to the stage to join me to talk about the Veterans Day Parade. Thank you all.
Yeah, we just heard from Louisville Mayor Craig Greenberg. This is the first update we have gotten today. Still 12 victims are confirmed dead. That number includes the UPS crew as well as a child. Mayor Greenberg saying that 9 are still missing, and there could be more who just haven't been reported. Now, if you're looking for someone, you haven't been able to make contact, you need to call 1-800-631-0604. He also talked about a delayering search that is happening right now. It's where they go layer by layer and they have to move debris and move rubble in order to find the victims who are still missing. He also mentioned that the FBI is now involved in this investigation. They're looking for any debris that you may have. So if you found anything whatsoever in your yard or property, make sure you reach out and let them know that you do have that. Also, some people still near the crash site don't have power. LG&E working, so if you do not have power, they're working to restore that. But of course, obviously, wires are down everywhere in that area. Also, we want you to know Gray Lane and Crinton Drive are still shut down at this time. So just remember that the only time you can get through there is if you are a first responder. He did mention, though, if you have a business and you want to check out your property, at some point they are going to escort those business owners to their properties to look at those as well. Air quality report coming back as good for the area. And also there is a vigil tonight at the Teamsters headquarters that is at 5 o'clock, and the entire community is invited to join in on that. Again, 12 victims at this time have been confirmed dead. None of their identities have been released publicly. Live from the airport this morning, I'm Carrie Grace. We're sending it back to your regular programming.